in understanding the ultimate nature of reality and the fact that as human beings, we are all immensely powerful fractals of the one and only source consciousness, which creates and animates all things. Now, of course, understanding this powerful truth is one thing. Applying this incredibly empowering wisdom to everyday life, well, that's another. Which is exactly why we provide you with a fresh serving of soul food for thought 5 days a week to help constantly remind you of what matters most. You are it. And I'm your host, Brandon Beachum. I'm the reflection and extension of you who will be here each Wednesday interviewing a different consciousness changemaker. And on the other 4 weekdays, leading the way to ensure that your perspective is consistently expanded, your vibration is constantly elevated, and your heart is overflowing and full. Also, this episode of the Positive Head podcast is being brought to you thanks to the support of Gaia. If you're not familiar, Gaia is the go-to source for streaming consciousness content online, and you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. Check it out. All right, all you positive heads, on this week's interview episode, I'm very excited to have my friend Sevan Bomar back on the show. Sevan is a specialist in lifestyle advancement and self-development, as well as an inventor, author, motivational speaker that enjoys giving knowledge and application, and the application necessary to instruct others on how to manifest vast projections. I love that. I love that description. Sevan, my friend, welcome back.
Wow. It's actually happening, isn't it? We're back together.
We were talking about it just before we turned the mic on. So for those of you who haven't caught, Sevan was the first person that I interviewed that I was like, oh my gosh. We were connected through my good friend, our Tim Powers, if I recall, and our mutual friend. And you came on I just looked it up before we started, episode 49. Now, I just crossed episode 500, so that was a minute ago. And there was so much juicy info there, so much you had to share. I'm like, I got to get this guy back on the show. So if you guys haven't, once you hear this, first off, I know you're going to be intrigued. You guys are going to love him if you haven't connected and been, following the show since way back there, back in the day, if you will. And episodes 49 and 54 are more juicy material. Where we talk about all kinds of things from professional reincarnation to, there's just so much good stuff in there. So I'll just go ahead and throw those out now. For any of you who are listening thinking, I want more, you can go back to those earlier episodes. But in the meantime, we've got today, and we got a lot of cool stuff to catch up on. I'm anxious to hear what you've been up to, what you're doing these days. What's the latest and greatest?
Oh, wow. I've taken full on. First of all, thank you so much for having me back on. It's always an amazing time to be on the show and also to connect with your audience because, we have such a major connection together. I always, some people always say, hey, man, you're saying what I'm saying. I'm like, no, it's just we're on the same frequency, and you tune into this frequency and, we should be on that same accord together. And what's been happening is that I've just been playing that chord, brother. Like I've been realizing just how much power we have in this realm and how much, we're really capable of doing, especially if we take that responsibility for ourselves. And man, what could I really begin with? Like we've been working on so much. We've actually pioneered now a device that actually allows us to program water. I've been working with consciousness.
Oh, is that
really?
All?
I just cured the known world of an invasive plague, and and then at the end of the day, I went on a fast, and but I'm sure,
walking on water, as I'm programming it.
Just drinking dangerous poisons to see they have no effect on the conscious mind, and
of course,
it's been that we've been really, really doing some epic stuff. Obviously, for those that know about us, they know that we've been doing this for quite a bit of time. It's been 7 years since we started off with the resistance. And it's just continuously metamorphosized into something more and more expansive. So, we're at Secret Energy now, and we're getting into it. Like,
that background is, Sevan, sorry to interrupt, but that background's probably good for those there's probably quite a few people who are hearing of you for the first time. So maybe just a quick sort of, background
sure.
on your journey.
This is the part of the interview. I'm like, okay, let me turn the recording on, because everyone needs to know it's not like I'm like the Tom Cruise household name yet. But
not yet, anyway.
Not yet. My history is very enigmatic history, if I can say so myself. It's really put me into quite an interesting position in life now. And just to have a rather long story shortened, I went through the process of exploring spirituality as we know it. Since I was a little kid, it was really a prerequisite of the household. And this was just because my mother had this education already about what was going on with the system and what was going on with the curriculum and the food and the clothes and the seasoning and all the stuff that we're actually learning now. And I was raised like that. But then it had just kind of a crazy effect for me when I reached my teens. It was more of like a slingshot effect where I was just wanting to get out of there and, wanting to live like all the rest of the kids and things like that. And true enough, I went out into the world and I explored and I did a lot of different things and I really saw what the world has to offer. And then somewhere in my late 20s, I really started benefiting from those seeds that were planted earlier in relation to higher levels of spiritual connection. And this was happening to me just with everything that I was experiencing in life. There was always like a voice that was giving me extra knowledge about what was going on, all the way to just deep in the core to realizing that I just had such a different purpose than what I was actually doing, which at that point was just being an entrepreneur and handling businesses and that kind of thing. And I got a massive wake up. I came to Costa Rica after that wake up, like a higher vibratory activation, which we all go through either in our lowest lows or our highest highs. And from that point, I wrote a book called Decode to the Matrix, which was really like me getting all this information that I had, been. I have a hard time using the new words. Like people say, oh, you mean a download? And because it's taken so lightly when, it literally crippled my systems for a while of how to interact with the world after that. But it was that experience that just it gave me the ability to see things so vividly and clearly that I was able to remove myself and detach myself from all the things that I had accumulated. And then I came to Costa Rica, which obviously is it's a paradise as far as nature and that kind of thing is concerned. Sure. And I was really able to start going through this healing process that I didn't even approach from the level of, I need to go and do a cleanse or I need to get myself conscious. It was kind of like I was smacked like a Mack truck, like just not even paying attention. Then all of a sudden blindsided by high levels of spirituality. So what happened is I wrote the book and I was kind of like my last will and testament to the world. Like, hey, here's some knowledge about the language and about how it's put together and how I've uncovered this deeper secret that's being revealed through it. And you can start deciphering your own life with this code. And that book was called Decode to the Matrix. I gave it away for free. And needless to say, while I was saying farewell, so long, Earth, it actually went viral. And it just pulled me back into just what I know my mission is, because when I start getting emails from people saying they had experienced similar things and I was filling in the dots for them and that they wanted to know what was going on right now, I started a website that was called thewords.ning.com in the beginning. We named it The Resistance like a few months later. And it actually became the #1 website on Google for those keywords. And it just attracted so many people that had that same vibe of, hey, let's get out of the old way that we're doing things, all the gurus and, the spirituality and all this stuff. And let's tap back into ourselves. And I was going through obviously this real-time quest. So what I started doing was just documenting what I was experiencing on that quest. And my ultimate goal, because of the big shakeup, was to find out not only what happens when you die, but to penetrate the recesses of the arcana or the spiritual knowledge available here on the planet. And I was doing that for my own personal reasons. Like, hey, I need to know what happens personally for me when I leave here. If my eyes close, everybody else's eyes don't close. So, but it was a serious thing is what I'm saying. I didn't have other people in mind when I was doing it. I was like, yeah, I got to figure out what exactly happened to me. And in that, obviously that's all of our story in many ways, is that we are looking to patch those gaps of amnesia, and any information we can give each other and any connection that we can give each other that gets us closer to that is generally well welcomed from anyone that's experiencing that personally. So that's what it ultimately became, was a place that people started connecting and realizing that, hey, you know what, we have a lot in common with what we're discovering. Why don't we try to map it out more? And then, there was always that divine synchronicity, which was leading us to more and more of what we were seeking. as far as getting these answers. And then now we're in the all-knowing, and this is basically a space that I never thought would exist, which is not having any more questions and allowing the mind, body, and soul to work in complete unison, so that way you can have this unlimited power of not getting bogged down by so many what we would say is positive and what we would say is negative thoughts.
Right. Well, that's quite a journey you've been on, and of course now you have secretenergy.com, right, where you have Innerversity. I mean, you're a guy who's got your hands in so many things. It's like it's fascinating to watch the journey unfold, and of course, I'll be continuing to watch it unfold. But what is sort of bubbling up? I mean, there's so many areas so many rabbit holes I know we can go down with you. What is some of the things that are bubbling up that you feel most excited about, or information that's coming through that you would want to share with the audience?
Well, these days, I'm a huge fan of the practical stuff, like. If anyone knows me, they know I'm like the king of complexities and conspiracies and codes and languages and those kind of things. And of course, many are attracted to the platform for that reason. But obviously, since this is a real thing, like we don't want to hold anyone up. We're not trying to hold back information until a certain point. So a lot of people began to say, okay, so what is the conclusion to all of this? But, unfortunately, there's no conclusion. There was no beginning, so there's no end. Well, wake up to that. And then realizing that, it's time to get back into action, right? so I'll take that comfort away. And it's like, okay, well, since you won't be laying down anywhere and going to sleep for a while, which they call death, then now what are we going to do? We got to reconstruct this entire thing, and we got to take that on as the responsibility. So one of the main things that I can say now for sure that has really come up that's different than what we were doing before is grounding this. Like actually saying, okay, I've been up in space invading, and I've been, on fifth parallels, and, I've, done the DMTs, I've done the ayahuascas, I've been through those different journeys and still go through them. However, I'm noticing something going on in the reality that needs to be addressed. And that is primarily getting that change, getting that true application to all this stuff that we're describing, allowing that to become available to people rather than becoming something like a fictitious story. And so I started checking back in history, even all the way to Mount Shasta times, and really seeing, how many groups of people over time have thought that we were going into some major level of expansion and awareness, to only finally awake to the truth of that actually things are seeming to go backwards. And obviously everyone has their different perspectives of it, and I always respect those perspectives because many of us are pure optimists, so we don't at times want to accept what exactly is going on. But I also believe accepting what's going on puts you into a position to change it. So it's kind of like AA. You got to accept that you're alcoholic first before the healing can start, and you can kind of get yourself onto a different stage. So I personally see that the conscious community overall is getting more conscious. And it's like conscious to me in this case would be like waking up. But what are they waking up to? Are they waking up to everything being prepared and set up the way that they want to and they conceived it should be? Or are they waking up to this nightmare of the presidents and the energy, the foods and the amounts that organic foods cost and all these kind of different things? And it's sometimes like for many people, and this has just been my experience, that they almost would rather have stayed asleep, but now it's like too late because they've been
right. Once the cat's out of the bag, you can't put the blinders back on.
They can't put yourself back to sleep. And so this is kind of like a weird phase when it goes on, because generally when you come into an awareness, you're thinking, okay, all this awareness that I'm having, once it gets shared with the world, we're all going into an enlightenment. And everyone has felt that same way. But let's just face it, as time rolls on, you realize that, hey, maybe it's a little bit slower process than you thought. But the truth is that there's like when you come back into the physical reality, there's many things that there's many things that have been structured right now that are working that include things that we're missing. For instance, like when it comes to creating conscious adaptations like tools and forms of entertainment, you name it, there's not really any houses that you can go to. Like if I say, well, I have this device, like right now we've been through the complete manufacturing and prototyping process, or prototyping and manufacturing process for this device. And there's so many things that I needed to know and teach myself using the same metaphysical adaptation and learning things really fast and seeing how all the things connect. But there were so many different things that I needed to know. It let me see that, hey, actually a lot of people's ideas are not really getting out there. And especially, again, for conscious people, because we have ideas all the time. And they were like, why don't we create something like this? And then the whole channel or the throughput to where we would create something like that is just not there. And so, of course, we kind of go on that mission ourselves sometimes. And then we end up having to do things that we're not either really good at or we don't like to do. It's kind of like a singer. Right. They just want to sing. They don't want to, load up the program in the computer and try to figure out what's going to work. See if the marketing campaign is put together properly. And it's like, hey, man, why don't somebody else do that? I just sing. And this is what happens with everything to me. There's so many moving parts. And so many parts. Exactly. So what we decided is that each of us have this uniqueness. And this is really what's been like on the hot burner, is teaching people how to cultivate and then bring out their uniqueness, because it answers this riddle about, obviously, if you have to work in this matrix, generally you have to work, or the fake matrix, you have to work in something that you don't like to do. And this burns up a lot of time. It burns up a lot of energy. But hey, it's necessary, right, for most people. However, they're generally not working, obviously, in what is developing their uniqueness or part of their uniqueness, where they're artists or singer or you name it. They're building someone else's world, someone else's dream. And then so thus it feels like work. It doesn't feel like fun. And obviously any person who starts tapping into their uniqueness, they realize that, hey, I could do this for hours and hours and I don't even feel tired because it's connected to my passion. So we found out, just like that same model in business, that if you want to create a successful company, then you should bring out something that everyone's in need of. Well, it turns out that a person's uniqueness, because it's exclusive to them, is what we all need. But at first, a person's uniqueness can be quite abrasive to others. In fact, uniqueness sometimes creates the reason why some people don't like you, because unique, after all, means not like them. And so when we start learning that each person has something to bring to the table that is not necessarily like the other person, which actually works in all of our favor since we're putting something gigantic together, it gets us over that hump that sometimes we can't cross when we're just in judgment. And it puts us to the point of realizing that actually there's another responsibility that comes behind that, which is the responsibility of the elder. And that doesn't matter what age you are. It's a level of maturity, which is to really know that if you can assist a person in bringing out their uniqueness, most importantly by showing them how you discovered yours, then it's only going to benefit all of us, because you're going to get a chance to see something that is not here yet. And with that in mind, and demystifying a lot of the metaphysical sides to what we're dealing with when we address situations such as racism, and really also being smart enough to not just put out what we want to put out, but understanding how this algorithm works and how this, like, YouTube's work, and when you can jump on a trending topic, because you can bend anything to giving wholeness. So how you could take a trending topic and how you can start to really get some attention to what you're doing and what you're developing and what you're saying. So I have a saying for that. It's called big ship, small rudder. And what this means is that Earth, while being gigantic, still has this very small rudder. So to actually steer Earth, or to gain the attention of hundreds of thousands of people in one moment, is actually not that complex. But what we're challenged with now is what we're going to do when we have that attention. So we look at movements like Occupy Wall Street, and we see that this was a time actually where people started coming together and they started to realize that, hey, there's a power in our numbers, et cetera, but there was no plan. And these are real things that are happening in our reality. There was no plan. So now when you say, well, what happened to the Occupy Wall Street movement, Occupy France, and all these movements, and they just fizzed out. Why? There was no plan. So it puts us into the position of realizing that, hey, we're creators, so we shouldn't have problems developing something new, but we have to get back into that. Because every time that we go and we try to pick up like some old archaic system that has so much baggage on it, and that means different things to different people, then we often find ourselves back into that same pit of judging, or someone that has some kind of animosity against it. We have to pioneer new things and then create entire systems, because we're intelligent enough too, based on 2017, which sounds like a movie from the future, but not like 600 BC. And
Right.
realizing that, hey, it's not actually someone else responsible for doing this. And also, this is not such a massive mission. And what I mean by that is that when you're building something very complex, how easy it's going to be for everyone, it's really based on things like the architects and the engineers. Something that looks very complex to somebody could totally be simple to other people. So when you have those kind of insights and you can say, well, why don't we build it like this? Why don't we create open source? Something that would take 10 years could actually take 10 months, could take 10 days, depending upon how well oiled that machine is. Are we using these technologies and these connections and things that we have now to really take us into a level of true sovereignty? And so that's really what it's about, is taking all these tools as adaptations. This is the first time that I personally see that the world has been capable of doing something like this. Because even if you keep going back 500, 600 years, for me, I only go back 40 or 50 years. I go back into my life, because that's, to me, enough. I don't have to load any programs of the past or the future. But in that last 40, 50 years, I have to look at, well, what's really been going on? We didn't even have cell phones, internet. Those kind of things are still relatively new to the age that we're living in. And because of that, that also gives us an advantage that was never thus available before. So we can't actually even look to the past and say, well, why, if they didn't accomplish it then, what makes us think that we're going to accomplish it now? Actually, quite the contrary. Exactly. And so it's taking
totally different world.
The tools, the productivity tools that we have now, also connecting each other in these ways. Like, we have these WhatsApp groups and things like that with our groups. And then really seeing how, contrary to what I believe, I always thought that we definitely needed to, and I'm still not saying we don't, but it's a place you got to start somewhere, that basically that having a virtual platform was never going to give the connection of a physical platform. And that may be true, because those are different modes, different spaces. But I've seen people connect on things like these groups that we've been putting together and really become a support system or a tribe for each other. And it's been so dynamic. It's been patching the holes that have been missing. And so that's really just that's one of the parts of it, is putting in the organic grid. And there's phases to it. So we look at this now, and so I'm using all this knowledge and intelligence. So, because what happened is that I started to become like Megamind or something. Like, I started pulling in so much data, and I had different hybrid ways of doing it, like studying so many of these things with frequency, studying so many of these different things with lights and photonics and metamaterials, and having a makerspace and a fab lab in my own house. And, so all those adaptations and working at an institute for a year and seeing all the equipment they had there, I started really demystifying what goes on with the body and how it really works. And I just basically realized that we don't know much. And if we keep taking someone else's word for it all the time and not investigating things ourselves, the depths of what's going on in reality, then we could be misinformed. And because when we take a look ourselves, we'll see things that somebody should exclaimed about. And let me just give an example. So when we're looking into these metamaterials, which are basically these patterns that you see inside of plants and things that determine their decay cycle, and to not get any complex terms going on, let me give some definitions. A decay cycle is how long it takes something to die. So obviously things on the planet have different decay cycles. Turtles, flies, plants, flowers, all of them have different decay cycles. And likewise, they don't communicate. A lot of species don't communicate. In fact, actually, all of them don't communicate in English. So they have to have some kind of form of communication that allows them to be aware of one another. And so that's what a meta pattern is. It's way down there. If you keep zooming in, you see this pattern. And then based on the symmetrics and the perfection of that pattern, it determines how long that species can live before it needs to go through its entire process again and basically regurgitate itself. So what we discovered within all of this is that when you look at that and oh man, I kind of slipped my train of thought here, but basically what I'm saying is that when you look into these kind of things, like which I've been able to do, I've been able to take some pollen and look under the microscope and start seeing these patterns. I would assume that what I saw under these at this pollen would be somewhere, and someone would say, "Hey, look at these patterns that are in pollen." But then now that I think about it, where was I ever supposed to get into that kind of conversation? Like who was, like if I'm sitting on the bus and somebody says, hey, look at this metamaterial pattern inside this pollen, it actually means that there's some form of bandwidth going on between these two species of plants. And this is possibly how they're communicating over distances larger than where our cell phones can generally reach. So who's going to have that conversation? So what we find out
Only
when we start to, right? Like if you happen to land next to me on the plane, then maybe yes. But what I'm saying is generally this is not the standard conversation we're going to have anyway. So what I'm saying is there was never really any sessions to where we would be sitting down and discussing something like this with anyone. So to automatically assume that every single thing that we know about that's important to know has already been revealed is just idiocracy. But somehow we feel that way. We feel like we're in a world where all the inventions have been discovered and that even trying to start now would be nothing like having a Hadron Collider and having science. Let's just leave it up to them because after all, they have all this intelligent equipment. And it's nothing like that. I'm finding that you actually know, just like your uniqueness, you know secrets to things, how to create things, how to design things, because that's what we really are, is we're creators, right? So you know how to create something unique. And now what you need is the adaptation to actually create that. And what I've been noticing is that there's a lot of other powerful knowledge that connects with what we're actually experiencing on Earth as a stage of amnesia, because it shows that there was a massive impact point. And if you can just look at Earth as an entire body, not full of these different divisions that we're calling selves, but as an actual body and all connected as one, if it took any kind of impact, it'd be very similar to somebody giving you a very serious blow to the back of the head. The moment that you recover, you wouldn't actually be too aware of what you were before, what happened. You'd be a bit groggy. And this is the state that I actually find humanity in now, is that just this whole fogginess of, okay, so what do those pyramids do? And what happens when we leave? And who's God again? And what should we do? And that whole grogginess actually doesn't pair up and match with the magnificence of the being. Like there's the type of equipment that we're working with, if we're using that term, thymus glands and this kind of thing, it doesn't really match up for that kind of, just let's say all out stupidity. And our potential is so high, it leaves us with a true missing link. And what I'm finding is that missing link can only be connected by us going through these experiences with each other, dematerializing and dissolving all of this, the whole judgment, which I believe is a huge cognate of where everyone is now in this fabricated time, is after Judgment Day. Just like the book says, hey, you judge and ye shall be judged. So it's basically because we're so busy, not even just the judgments on low levels, like I don't like this person, but that's blue, that's green. And this whole contrast-based system that we've adapted as our mode of communication is seriously impaired. This trinary code that we really generally exist with and communicate in, that transcends the, is it good for me or is it bad for me language, that allows us and opens up the other side of things to us. And I believe that there's a lot of things that are in the reality that are symbolic for constantly showing us that there's half that we're only getting exposed to and then another half missing, like why we only see half of the moon, why we only have half of a language, like English at 26 characters, 26 times 2 being 52, and this being 52 weeks in a year. Just showing that, hey, when you look deep into the mathematics and you look deep into it's all over the damn place. This is what actually starts becoming so like, that's what creates the eeriness and the paranormalness of a spiritual experience, is all of a sudden you're waking up to something that's been right in front of you and so close. It's like right in front of your eyes to where you can't even see it. And then you just pull back just a little bit and it starts coming to focus. And then you get super startled because you realize, lo and behold, there's another world. And there's not just another world. There's all these multiple existences. And this is something that's real. And that's the difference between if a person's, let's say, tuning into it on like some kind of radio station or whatever, which is cool, versus the person that actually is going through the experience, because the difference is what happens after that. Because that person who's gone through the experience, there's going to be no real way they can convince themselves that they didn't see or experience what they just experienced. And then they're left to deal with this really strange Joker face reality that is acting like, no, you didn't see that. And it's
totally.
But I can actually do it again. And this is, where you start learning the formulas to getting in and out of different states of consciousness. You start exploring even further, like Star Trek Enterprise, seeing that there's even languages that are visual when you're in certain states. So it's basically the quest. And so also, just not get me wrong in anything that I'm expressing. I'm not expressing an anger and a hatred. What I'm expressing is the onset of a massive adventure, and then the awareness that actually when we think that the glass is half empty, it's really half full, or maybe not even anywhere close to being full, but actually filling up. And that why we would believe that we've discovered so much, we're just really scratching the surface in the beginning, and that it may be a high possibility that this is something that all of us as beings need to go through to understand the power of the collective. And, and the difference between, hey, when you're by yourself, like when you see children as they're growing up, they start getting this kind of selfish thing going on. And then there becomes this huge experience that they begin to go through, of realizing why they need others, why they need friends, why they need to. So this is it. And so I can't really liken my reality to anything different than the standard process of what we would see from the time a child comes into the world to the time that it supposedly leaves. But if we look very closely, like that's why I say, hey, man, you're deep. If we even use the tools that we have, like we're still trying to figure out how to rebuild Rife's microscope that was allowed, that we could actually see live organisms by using crystal lenses. So this is stuff that's happened, and then it just gets shoved under the carpet for a Mayweather fight. Or, and it's like,
right.
Hey, hold on, what am I really dealing with here? It's like, you see this high definition 4K footage of the Temple of Wanas, WNAS, just opened up like maybe, was it like 8 weeks ago or something like this? They opened up a temple that's been closed for 28 years to where they built the pyramid text. So meanwhile, this thing is already elaborate. It's like you could still read what's on the walls, and that people are not even concerned. And see, and this is something that I said today, and I just want to share it here. See, when we look at these ancient structures, Angkor Wat and this kind of things, if you understand anything about building, you start understanding the magnitude of what's being created. But it's not just, there's always a basic level of thinking at it. People say, well, we couldn't even build anything like the pyramids in this time because even the machinery that we have now would be struggling to build that. It's not just that. It's the mindset. The mindset we're in right now as a people, as a collective, et cetera, we don't actually have the mindset to build something like that. So we could have all the tools. Like, I don't doubt that they got some real plasma motors, some ion engines, and some displacement systems, some cymatic degeneration and reintegration system. I don't doubt that that's there. But see, the mindset of actually creating something functional and organic that is going to raise the vibration of things is not there. And so it does. So that's the true part that needs to be there. So that's why I was saying, when we're cultivating conscious people, meaning cultivating them, assisting them, giving them the mentorship that's necessary for them to grow into their uniqueness, we simultaneously open up a portal to those ideas being brought into our dimension. And I don't believe in time at all. I believe in nonlinear time, that there's everything in certain spaces and times. But we are the time machines. Like, we're the ones that can go to sleep for 5 minutes and feel like we spent a year somewhere else or a month somewhere else. And so if everything is still sound and light, and we have access to sound and light in our dreams, if we're bringing those dreams and those projections into this reality, because we have the core of it, which is the light composites that it's made out of, we can then bring that through our own womb, and this is male or female, bring it through our own womb and then take it through the process, which is what the chakra centers are for, the process of birthing it into all realms and also being able to interact with it on all those different levels. And this is now more up to what we would describe as being the potential of the human being, which, of course, when you start seeing it as it really is, it's also a rather dangerous weapon. Just like one of those old comic books, it's like this power in the wrong hands could be potentially disastrous. And so we do see that someone can use their power and use their energy, their attraction, et cetera, to be quite counterproductive. But at the end of the day, that would still give beings who function on contrast the idea of the potential of what they could really choose to do if they decide to focus that energy in another direction.
All right. Well, now seems like a good time to tell those of you who aren't familiar a bit about our sponsor, Gaia. I've been a big fan of Gaia for many years now, which is why they're the only content provider I have ever reached out to in regards to potentially supporting the Positive Head podcast. So needless to say, I'm very excited they're now supporting this show. Gaia truly is my personal go-to source for streaming consciousness content on the web. They have an incredible 7,000 plus exclusive videos covering 5,000 years of wisdom. They have a plethora of amazing content to always keep your positive head spinning. For example, in the brand new series Beyond the Legend, best-selling author of Chariot of the Gods, Eric von Daniken, takes us beyond the myths and legends that have shaped our view of history to present an alternate view of historical events, megalithic structures, and archaeological discoveries. Eric's been researching this stuff for over 50 years. So if you've ever wanted to deep dive into these sorts of topics that you're just not going to find on traditional networks, Eric is doing just that on Beyond the Legend. And that's just one example of fascinating content you can find on Gaia. As you all hear me constantly say, it's a daily conscious effort to maintain an elevated vibration. And if you're looking to go deep down the rabbit hole to do so, Gaia is the best place I know of to do it, period. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positive head. That's spelled GAIA.com/positive head. Check it out. Yeah, I think one of the things that you said that really, jumps out at me is how important it is for everyone and for us to support one another in uncovering our unique gifts. The way I sort of view humanity in those of us that are coming together at this time and sort of realizing, maybe the sum is greater than the equal parts. It's like we're unique puzzle pieces of source. The way I envision it is we're unique puzzle pieces of source that is fractalized. And, now like the game is, okay, like let's build the puzzle. Let's put it back together, right? It's the same exact thing. And how do we come together and uncover help each other uncover our fullest potential and true gifts to serve the collective, right? That's sort
exactly.
of how I envision
and this is the question that I would have to propose to the astronaut side of self, meaning like, astronaut, do you think you can come land that here really briefly and use all that quantum knowledge that you have in order to solve some of the basic issues? And this is what I challenge myself with now, is saying, well, first of all, like, again, I'm only in the competition with myself. And what happens is that I challenge myself constantly on my flexibility. Like, can you go all the way beyond, let's say, ninth dimension, whatever, in a meditation, start really interfacing with all that really is, and then come back in and maybe pop in a VR game just to see if it has any potential to do anything different than, what the system is being used for now? Or do you feel like that there's some kind of huge barrier between those two worlds? Because that barrier only exists within us. So what happens is that I challenge myself for this flexibility so that way I can constantly land the ship. I can bring it back down and say, okay, well, let's simplify this. And, even to address that question, okay, so where do we begin with this? It just seems so obscure because it's almost like a lot of people, they just want to think of it when it's finished. They don't want to think about all the different steps, like the emails and, again, the stuff that you don't like, the website building, the little graphics, the calling other people and getting them involved, the missed calls, the arbitration system, the network that has to be set up for us to, communicate what happens with cryptocurrency. So all of those different points. When you're an entrepreneur, however, you're familiar with that. That's why we generate conscious entrepreneurs, because if you've ever taken anything from concept to creation, then you're familiar with all of that because you're responsible. If you really want to see the finished product, you're responsible for actually mastering every single part of it. So what I've done is that with presenting that challenge to myself, I realized that actually it's the whole money thing. That I don't care how intelligent a person says that they are. If they can't figure out the money thing, that really does say a lot about this so-called intelligence. We really must have a rounded bearing about what we're dealing with the fake matrix. And I always love to distinguish these because they get often confused. The fake matrix is like what you see built in the streets of Washington, what you see built in big cities. That's the fake matrix. While the real matrix is actually what you see in nature. Make no mistake, that is a real matrix there, and there's something to be gained and learned there. And then beyond that is the all-knowing. And so if even having these kind of bearings, it's like having a map somewhat to the terrain itself. Map is not the terrain, but it does give you some bearing of what you're dealing with. So when we look at the fake matrix, we see that the fake matrix runs on codes. And if you learn how to punch those codes, then you always get the response that you're looking for, because most of the fake matrix is actually run by machines and run by computers, like all these algorithms and Googles and all that, Facebook and taking down people's pages and all that. Like a lot of that is run by machines. So it's also easy to fool a machine when you learn how it's working. So these are the things that I was saying about, okay, well, what can we do for each other on that level? Like I wanted to create something, and this is what we're doing now, is I wanted to create something that would take a person from nothing, because I still feel like, as long as they have the will to do it, because I feel like that still, even this level of spiritual knowledge is really for connoisseurs. Like this is for when you have a couple hours to actually really ponder the unknown. And anyone that's really being hammered by the financial system doesn't have that kind of time. It's like they're not thinking about this kind of thing because they don't have the luxury to. And so what I like to think about is, okay, so that means that since that person is caught in the whole time cycle, they need to be able to buy time. And they also need to understand the energetics, which what we call the matrix mechanics, and the current and currency, like how their energy is moving around and what their energy is being invested in. So it's easier when you develop a map. So we have a new site or new project that's coming up. It's called unify.life. And what it is basically a map of all of these interactions that you encounter in real life. And it shows even solutions to some of the dead ends. And it shows also the connections between others that have mastered those areas. So what we're doing is we're saying, okay, let's go all the way to the bottom. Let's figure out, just like my mom used to say when I was younger, and I see so much what she meant now. James, we don't manufacture anything. We don't create anything. And because of that, we'll always be on a certain level. You have to learn how to create your own. So this is how my mom used to teach me. And I realized that that's exactly it. Because if you even look at a microwave and you say, okay, if I say, hey, go put me a microwave together, it's like, okay, it ain't going to happen. Like even something like an iron, which is just a heating element, is going to be complex to a person who never even studied electronics before. But I find that we have to work on where you get to. I don't say you have to do anything, but you get to work on mastering something. So that way you can see the blueprint that connects to everything. Like I've come to realize that when you master something and then you know metaphysics, it gives you the keys to everything. Like even how a car works, because a car has to have a level of mastery or it doesn't start up. So every single part inside that car actually connects to a certain part of life. Same thing with computers. If it's not put together completely, it's not functioning. It doesn't have a completion. But if you learn all those pieces, CPU being the sun, the circuits that are there being the stars, the lines that go in between the stars, connecting it, memory, what's holding the memories, so all of those components, you can map those out to real things in real life when you have the awareness of metaphysically how things work, and that all of this stuff, no matter how foreign it may look, is all coming from the same source. And, we love to argue about it, like including plastic. There's always something that we want to exclude, but all of this stuff is all coming from the same prima materia. And so demystifying it for ourselves is what judgment, when we get rid of judgment, what that really does. It gives us the opportunity to begin to process the completion of something, because I've started to map out that even when we go into these judgments and we utilize that form of our mind, which is generally thinking, that's why the word judge is also synonymous with many words like bank. Like if you go look up the word judge, then a bankster comes up, because it's actually the same thing. A person who manages weights and manages currency. That's why they call it grammar. You're like measuring weight and time, dimensions. Those are weights and time. So all of these words actually are saying something to us, and they're saying, hey, there's a system that is really in place here that is running in everyone's mind, a program, if you may. And we know what different parts of that program, we know what all of that program means. When you load English, you know the meaning of those words. But when we're saying words, if we pay close attention to certain words, they actually cancel out each other. Like the word interest. This means that I'm interested in what you're doing. This should mean that I'm really excited about what you're doing. But the word says interest, like I'm going to sleep. So, I mean, and this is just light. This is light. Like I can show words that will blow people's minds away about it. And there's sessions for that. People check out information about that. But what I'm saying is that you cannot talk in one direction and move in another. You can't talk backwards, but move forward. And look at the word backwards, right? We've talked about that. The words are backwards. So that whole progress that we want to get to sometimes, it actually breaks down to these mixed signals that we're sending with our mind. And that's why I really don't use the mind much. I really work with knowing. And then that way I can get into the Zen flow. And then once I'm in the Zen, then I'm accessing data from a whole different mainframe that doesn't require me to feel like that I need to study it, that I need to have a degree for it, that I need to basically get numbers, like all the numbers. Oh, he's got 10 degrees. He's got $10 million and he's 50 years old. And like all the numbers that are supposed to equate to the importance or the level in which I've reached. I tap into something that actually says quite the contrary. The most powerful number is 0. So it completely goes against the entire system of actually when you have 5 billion, then that's where you really want to be,
somebody.
Right, exactly. And then it starts tapping you into the realization that actually there's no scarcity. And any of us that have been on any kind of spiritual journey like knows that you get into these spaces where you just want the energy to turn down. It's like, okay, well, drop me off now. And so it shows you that there's more of spaces that the energy, it's more of a challenge to deal with it versus that there's not enough. So this whole idea of scarcity is completely false. And we know it's false now. But see, here's the other issue. We can know what is the balanced thing to do. I'm not saying the right thing, notice, but we could know what the balanced thing is to do. But if there's no alternatives, sometimes we go right back into that same buffoonery because, hey, quite frankly, there's nothing else to do. Meaning that who set up an entire infrastructure for us to go into something else? Like, Masons will even tell you if you get into a massive argument with them, in the last part, they just tell you, well, build your own then. If you just feel like that this is not what you want in this government, and then they always throw in, hey, if it wasn't for us, you wouldn't be reading and you wouldn't even have languages to be able to use. And, they have their own stance. And the truth is when they challenge at times with, hey, well, go create your own, we have to be ready to meet that challenge and say, yep, you know what, I'm working on my sovereignty. I see that there's a way for me to have maximum power. So when we're looking at our power, then we're now really more looking into, instead of having this massive spiritual power where we're able to read into all these different minds and all this stuff, we're looking at, hey, but can you turn your own faucet on and that water's coming from your well? And hey, can you turn your own power on and that's coming from a sustainable system? Because that's how you affect the as above with the as below. Meaning that if you become a sovereign here, you also accomplish that on a higher level and vice versa. And so, but it's a real thing. It's kind of like a personal achievement, though. And that's why I like to call the difference between success versus fulfillment, because success can always happen in different stages and just keeps coming at times, versus fulfillment is when you're done with the whole race of life and you're sitting back and you're like, you know what? I really went in on this one. I really got everything that I need from this life. And I'm not in regret or looking back. I don't need to revisit this place again. I'm ready to move on. And that's the whole fulfillment aspect of our consciousness that we would have to reach, especially as we get older and older, in order for us to feel more grounded in who we are and what we're really about. Because as we transition from this, and those governors are taking off, because the body does create weights, measures, limitations. It succumbs to time and all those different kind of things. But when all that comes off and you're faced with the true you, you're going to have to address where you're really at. And so the great part is that we can get more comfortable with those spaces now, and we can do that together. And then we can become the bridge from the first person that's just now figuring this all out to the person who's already ready to take it on and beyond, we can actually cover all of that ground together. And so that's what we're creating. That's not, I won't say that's something we want to create. This is something that we've created already. There are 17,000 people inside of the network now. There are already people jumping into this open source wealth program that we just launched. And then obviously the Innerversity keeps rolling. And this is all something that I would say that in the beginning, like personally, I felt like maybe people, I mean, from the, and I'll say it just like this, from the impressions that I was getting from everyone around me, my peer group in the conscious community, was at times saying what I was going to do was going to get me killed. And here I am 7 years later, stronger than ever, and it's still rolling. But I also realized that there's a lot of me that has died, though. So there wasn't any a lie there. There was a lot of immature aspects of how I thought things were, you know, like the hero program, the Save the World program. There was a lot of different things that were running that died. And I always call those are really egregors. Those are things that we've concentrated on so much in our lives, perceptions that we've had so much of in our lives that they become concentrated, and they even can move on their own volition, even send thoughts into our own minds and have us thinking that we're them. And then when we go into the transition phase, this is often what we're battling, as we're battling that side of our old stagnant self that is under certain persuasions and certain beliefs. And then when it finally dies, then that true coming out of the new being is actually occurring. And a person, when getting used to doing this, it's almost like you can shed your skin before even nature would do it. And what I mean by that is you can change, you can, that's why it says, you know, move in mysterious ways. You can change into what comes next before the default, hey, let's force everyone into what comes next cycle goes through. That's generally uncomfortable for everybody. And it's like for you, you already realize that there's a time and a space for everything. And you're just riding this galactic wave and benefiting off of what you're dealing with right there in presence of, rather than, you know, gandering off to, you know, being around Venus and floating in the stars or battling Saturn and his sons. And, you know, it's just like, you know, that every single thing that is ever, as I say, everything under the sun, every single thing, that possible thing is actually going to happen. So you're just present to actually harness as much of that as you really can. And so this is, and it takes us all as a collective, because, you know, we're still talking about, if you look at electronics, because this is what I started also studying deeply to see, it's in electronics too. They will have so much power. Like there's so much power coming from the outlet in your wall, that none of your electronics need all of that power. So almost 60 to 70% of all the stuff that's inside of that device is to regulate that power. And you have these capacitors, you have these resistors, you have all these different things. And I realized that that's actually how humanity was normally configured in this array. So that way we can harness this power and this potential like a completely manned and woman ship, and then continue to glide with this thing. And so I find, again, those same components that you find in these things that have to work also in life, and they allow us to see what's missing. And so that's what I'm saying. For anyone, it doesn't, like some people come into the discovery of the matrix by entirely different means. It generally just takes that you bolt on some kind of metaphysical view of life, and then whatever your profession is, it just demystifies the entire realm for you. And just having someone there to say that, like I said, G.I. Joe says, knowing is half the battle. Just knowing that, it just opens it up. It brings a certain level of comfort. When you have people around you on that same quest, on that same mission, and you're not feeling like some alien when you walked out the house because you just started addressing how the language was and how time works. And then everyone's looking at you like, we got one that
What's
can
he
see.
smoking?
Yeah, right. They start whispering into their watches on you, and it's really just the Apple Watch, at least you're not having to freak out all the time. So, yeah.
So share with me a little bit. I'm curious about your open source wealth program and what you're doing there. I had the pleasure of having Roxanne Meadows on a few weeks back, who is currently running the Venus Project, if you're familiar, with Jacques Fresco as our partner of 40 some years. And, there's a lot of, in their case, talking a lot about a monetary based economy going away and being replaced by a resource based economy. So I'm always very curious about, new paradigms and new ideas of how wealth can be sort of restructured and redistributed, I suppose. What does that look like for you?
For sure. Well, how our network works is that we're a bit beyond the CAD drawings, meaning that we're a bit beyond just the conception of what it's going to take, because I think we've become very fanciful and with watching lots of movies of how things could be and how things should look. And then now what has to happen is that there has to be some kind of accountability, because obviously some people are supporting many different projects and they're putting a lot of time and the energy into it and even resources. And then the founders, let's say, of those projects may not necessarily be fully aware of all the hurdles that they need to go through to create something like that, and also new adaptations. Because let's say, for instance, if you have a conceptualized idea 15 years ago, that's pretty much going to have to change and completely morph itself to where the world is right now, from technology to applications, et cetera. Like even cryptocurrencies and those kind of things just became a way of life for people, right? So what happens is that when we look at adaptations, productivity, you have to have things that actually connect with people from the basic level. That's what the big boys do. Google and these kind of people can connect with people on multiple levels. So what happens is that what we've designed is it's realizing once again that if we're asking people for something, if I'm saying, hey, donate to me, give me $5 million so I can start this project, we are still putting ourselves in that same position that is what we don't really need in the conscious community. Like we need to actually be generating something, not pulling something away from someone that is also becoming involved with us. It needs to be sustainable. And the same thing is with going on in conscious communities all the time, that when they're not sustainable, then they melt down in the arguments and the disagreements that everyone has when they start experiencing the stagnancy of not being able to grow because there was no plan about how can currency actually be generated. So this is that should be at really the forefront of the entire project in itself, is to actually get into some level of production and producing something. And when you get into production, you find that doesn't actually take some metaphysically brilliant, spiritual minded alien. It actually takes that real hardcore administrative business plan person that knows how it's all supposed to really work, and then knows how to bolt that on to the fanciful plans and ideas that everyone has. And if it's somehow missing that core backbone, then it's not going to work, because it still has to go into the matrix. So what we've developed is we've developed first a system, because we started carrying products like maybe a few years after we started. We kind of fell into the whole having products thing just unknowingly. And it just became because initially it was just giving information. Like I thought this mission would be over within a few months and the whole world was going to go to a whole different level. So you could see where my mind was, and I was moving like that. But then when I started getting sat down for the conversations about my body, which I sat into an institute with a gentleman who taught me every single thing about how the body works in relation to metaphysics and cleaning it out and stuff like that, I realized that there was a little bit more work that needed to be done. And just what was pointed out to me was, hey, if you think amazing now, son, imagine what you're going to think like and what you're going to feel like when you get yourself cleaned out. And that's the real thing that you got to tell people sometime is like, so some people is like, well, no, I'm already at this level and blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, well, that's great. But let's see where you can go when we clean out those filters. So what happened was that when I went on this whole quest of realizing that there were ways to tweak the body into getting it more in the position of this expansion, then we started realizing that there were elements and things that were out there that could assist with this. And that's how the store was developed. So here we are, let's say 4 more years later after that, and all this research and everything that's been poured in. And what it has us at is now at like 45 to 50 products that we know bona fide, vividly work for different scenarios, because, different strokes for different folks, hereditary issues, et cetera. And then on top of that, what I realized like 4 years ago is that, hey, maybe we should try to open up some kind of program to where other people could gain. Like I basically said to myself, hey, I can afford to, as long as I just balance out, I can afford to give other people the opportunity to represent these products also. And so I started this affiliate program. Now, we weren't really focused on that. So it was growing like steadily. Like it was like 80 people, 90 people. Now it's 1,200 people. And also when I started focusing more attention on that, seeing that, yeah, you know, it's a little brutish to explain to people how they should be eating this great food, and then they go and try to check out with it, and the ticket is like 5 times more than what they normally would be ordering, but you don't have any financial solutions for them. I even have people telling me, it's like, hey, you know, I want to meditate and all that kind of stuff, but right now I can't afford any of this organic food, so that means I have to eat GMO. So I don't really see the whole reason in me meditating. And it just, that kind of stuff, that pangs you in the heart, because it really is like, yeah, that's exactly the way that I feel too, is that, you know, sometimes you feel like they exclaim that this stuff is so bad that you need to like change it all. But if you don't have the money, then what's going to happen? And so what it is, obviously, for that person is to understand that it's intentions. Like I was getting into some zones and I was still eating Cheetos. I hadn't even figured out the whole diet thing yet. So intention is the key. But as you keep going along, you can help yourself out by learning and by practicing what is necessary to keep your body in balance. So what happened is that we created this, what became Spiritech. And it first launched off with us just in the affiliations of products that we have for wholesale. Then we started making a couple connections with people. Like one guy created a magnesium cream that basically fixes the big issue, which is magnesium deficiency. This causes depression. It causes all sorts of stuff. He's even cured himself of cancer, has articles on the paper by science people, even was able to supply his product to 19 NFL teams because of the amount of inflammation that it decreases and how fast it decreases. But all it's made out of is very high quality magnesium and then a few other elements. And the magnesium that we're actually getting in our body right now is like a byproduct. It comes from the Carlisle group. And you know, magnesium is used for all sorts of things, from electronics to different things. And so what the machines get is this high quality magnesium. And then what we get is like the byproduct from the mine. And then most people just, you know, they soak in that and they call that Epsom salt. And they even call it by the term Epsom salt when Epsom is the company. And now everyone just knows it as Epsom salt, right? But it's really the low quality magnesium. So anyway, miracles behind this magnesium. And these kind of products were so unique. And the relationships that we have formed with the people that develop those products. So that was like the first advent at us beginning to produce our own products or brand our own products. Now we've taken it a step further because we're always making quantum leaps. You know, getting deodorants and all those kind of things, which are great in the arsenal, is going to happen and will happen. But the most important thing is to take this knowledge that we have, because, hey, if we're in time, we're already out of time. Like, I don't like playing the whole time game. So that's why I move with urgency anytime I come into a realm and they're even counting time. And what this tells me is that, why don't we make a quantum leap here? And this is what Phi Aqua is all about. It's about using the highest medium that we have to make change, which is water, light, frequency, metamaterials, etc., and getting that all into one device to where we literally drink our projection. We literally begin to understand, first of all, how frequencies work with a device that can embed frequencies into water, and then begin to consume that water for short periods in order to see those effects actually begin to manifest in our life. This is more than possible. But then the dynamic spin to this, because with that kind of technology, for anybody who's seen Phi Aqua, they know, you know, this is a big leap. And also to be able to produce it. It would have never happened if we just didn't say we're going to produce it ourselves. If we were counting on other people, it just gets lost in the mail in China. So what happens is that, so you're literally responsible for building the entire projection. It's like having a baby. You're not going to take your baby out at the 4 months part and then put it in somebody else's stomach and then let them grow it. That's not, you have to see it all the way through. So in conclusion, what we decided is we're not going to just stop there. Now that we're manufacturing this device, we're going to give
this Phi Aqua device available.
It releases at the end of this year. Okay, cool. There's already a beta here, like at my house. And now it's just, you know, anytime you're launching something, you stage it right, you get everything done, you get the paperwork and all this kind of stuff, the roads, which is basically electronics and, you know, dealing with electronics and water. So there's just some final steps, not big, complicated stuff, just some icing on the cake. But the main thing is giving everyone else the opportunity to also take that product, boost up the commissions even higher than what ClickBank and all these other places are offer, and then actually really get this product out there and having it become another thing, another stable for people to begin to generate income off of. So this would be like Apple telling you, hey, we'll give you 20% of every single iPhone that you sell.
Right.
Apple's not doing that. And in fact, this is where the stagnancy is, because when a person can just get themselves on their feet, and then we have this unified component to where they now can move into the field that they work in. Like, we're basically creating a system to where if you're a life coach, everyone's a life coach in their own way. A life coach is just reporting what you're dealing with in real time, as long as you're having some kind of success.
Right.
And grooming that. And you have a lot of youngsters. And that's what I was saying. It's like a lot of us, we get into this knowledge and we're a bit older, but there's a lot of youngsters that are also getting involved with this, that are looking for mentors and looking for ways to sustain themselves. And if it's just information for them all the time, information, but there's no application, it leads them to go back out to the big bad wolf and to figure out how they're going to make their way there, which is generally going to be degrading, and some kind of moralistic bearing is going to be stripped away from them. But what other opportunity and what other choice do they have? And then on top of that, if we're just like a charity and we're trying to take in as many people as we can afford to take in off the donations that we're getting, this is like a vulnerability, because you're literally put in this position to keep asking someone for something every time. Hey, can you donate to my cause? And if you want to donate to this and donate to that, we don't need donations. What we need is the ability to use our intelligence and to realize that this is the age of the desktop. What people would not be able to do even 5 to 6 years ago, like you got SLA machines, those are stereolithography printers that can sit right on your desktop, that can fabricate real prototype devices so you can get to the next stage of creating something. That wasn't available before. The machine that was actually did that same thing was the size of my table and ran about $30,000 or $40,000. So what I'm saying is that we have to keep checking in. This happens every single day. There's a new revolution. That's why we're always on the tip. The revolutions are not so much happening all the time just on the spiritual level, because we need spiritual revolutionaries. But the other revolutions are happening, like, open source is a revolution. Cryptocurrency is a revolution. All these revolutions are happening. And what I started realizing is, why don't we just look at the core, the blueprint to what is creating those things, and apply it to spirituality, so we eventually get to advanced consciousness. We eventually get to what I call the day after ascension, because that's got to come. Like, I'm so tired of hearing about, the ascension process is going to happen then. And then the day goes by. I've just wanted to email those people and be like, hey, the world's still here, so what's going on? Like, everyone who just pretty much canceled the world out during the last solar eclipse, and we're all gone. Stock your refrigerator up with Alex Jones products. Here we go. So it's just like, okay, but we're still here. Now let's face this and see what we got to really deal with. And you know what? We're more than up for it. And so, I just gave you a brief overview of how it works, and it's completely integrated with what a person can do. And then it also opens up avenues to where, it's just really dynamic, because when you're telling someone also, hey, go out and to represent something, and they don't even have skills to do that, they may not even have views on their page, we give them everything. So we have basically these 5 points, and it's endorsed. We give them the training, we give them the products, we give them the endorsements, we give them the landing pages. What we're doing, the reason why we call it open source wealth, is because when you really study this stuff, and who wants to, it's super boring, but about marketing and things, there are things that you can do that equal a person trying what you have. And a lot of people don't know about those kind of things. That's not what they are good at. So instead of making it hard on them and saying, come up with some kind of copy, figure out what you're going to be able to present, we say, actually, we have people that do that like in their sleep. And they're going to give that to you. And we're not even asking for anything back, because anytime you're even involved, it's going to increase all of what we do. But anyway, everyone's always looking to like, but I do graphics, and I do really nice graphics. And somebody says, okay, well, I'm going to contribute these graphics. So that's actually what we have, is we have the graphics, we have anything that you can think of, the support system, anything that you can think of, because that's what we did. We thought of it all. And we put the pieces there. So that's what that is.
Well, I love where your head's at, and I love the stuff you're working on. I would like to change gears for a minute here. because you always have such fascinating insight into sort of the journey of the soul and what's happening with, let's call it weird shit with extraterrestrials or I mean, you always make me think, like, for example, my friend, now our mutual friend Shane, had the opportunity to connect with you down, I believe when he went to Envision Festival last year, and I was talking to him and he's like, sharing a little bit about his time with you. And he's like, oh yeah, Sevan had this fascinating sort of, theory about how our soul snaps in and out of our body when, depending on what's going on. Like, we have these moments where we're on autopilot, but the soul is literally like jumping from, different timelines and different life, maybe even, other, call it past or future lives, or on alternate realities and so forth. And our soul's sort of like snapping around. Does this ring a bell? You talking to him at all about that?
Oh yeah, for sure. And it's just, it's a really simple concept to come into the realization of, and that's, let's say that the soul is a star, and when you're talking about a star, it's like, I'm a star, I'm the star of the show, so I'm not going to be in a space and in a time that's not going to recognize me for what I am. So if you're living this boring life, basically, and you're not tapping into your character, then what happens is that soul will move on. And actually, there's different things that actually cause the spirit, if you may, to detach more from the body. Pain causes that. Hurt, fear causes that, to where that's why you get somewhat of an abstract nature with certain people. It's almost like nobody home, but it's generally because of certain types of things that have happened to them in the past that have basically pushed them away from the physical existence. And also, you can witness this within children to when they start, from the time that they're born, you start seeing that there's this process of awareness that begins to occur. So when they reach age, like, let's say 1 year or 6 months, you start seeing more of a glow in the eye. It's like literally whatever spirit is beginning to inhabit that being is now starting to pour itself into that consciousness. So it's not just the development of the physical part of the body. There's a development of the soul force being pulled into this realm. And of course, this would actually be like that because anytime we're dealing with time and space, you would basically have this smear of yourself across all these different realms. And when you make a realm prime, meaning you start to bring your existence into another realm, it's almost like you're waiting on yourself to catch up. And the way that you bring yourself here, like they would say, be here now, is to actually see how much of your spirit that you can bring into this realm, like how much awareness that you can actually bring into this realm. And so what I was referring to when I was talking to Sean was about how you get these times to where all of a sudden you get this strong deja vu. And what does that, and I was demystifying what that really is connected to. And it's connected to, since we live in a non-linear space, when we even leave this existence, we see the different things that have happened in this existence, like our major points, as like spikes on a record. It's like, okay, well, clearly something happened there because he went to 563 hertz and he's normally at 8. And that could be a car accident. That could be winning the lottery. That could be getting married. That spike point is going to be when the person has some kind of major thing that happens in their life. So when they say at the end of life that their life flashed before their eyes, it's not actually the entire life. It's the spikes. And the reason why we're invested into looking into those spikes is because those are the points that we generally reincarnate into, because those are the points that we feel like if a decision was made differently, then there would be a possible change in the overall outcome. So this has also led to why people have intuition, like, hey, man, I don't feel like I should be going today. And then they go and then some stuff happens. Where does that feeling come from? It comes from the non-linear side of self. So also we realize in certain laws, which is like thermodynamics, these kind of laws, displacement, mathematical equations, we find out that actually what's occurring is that there is a higher version, if you may, oversoul or perfected version of ourselves. And in order to be that, we need to switch places, meaning that we would necessarily go there and it would come here. And this is a very interesting way of putting it, but basically it means that everything can fit into one space as long as you're willing to change places. So oftentimes what we're battling is something that doesn't want to come into that space that we're in now, where we need it the most. It's like, hey, you deal with that down there and I'm up here. And it's like, no, I need all that power from up there down here now. And I need to take this guy and I need to put him back up there so that he can charge, you dig? So it's like learning how to use these quantum mechanics with yourself to realize how you're changing out these different quote unquote characters, and then also how to nullify dream bodies or characters that are running, that are burning power, that actually will have a completion, meaning the dream that you die in. You know, some have happened. Generally, they don't see the death. They just jump off the building or whatever, and then they wake up before they hit the ground. They're like, well, so much for that guy. Those are when timelines are actually ending in dream cycles or projections. And what you can do is you can actually consciously in certain timelines in their part of consciousness, so you could be more present. That way you can bring more of yourself here, because the more that you can bring of yourself here, then obviously the more power that you have to morph this quantum field. This is also what creates the unique character, because the more and more of you bring yourself here, this increases confidence, this increases passion, this increases magnetism and electromagnetism. And obviously that's current. That's what attracts people. It's like, let's say, for instance, you're talking about something that's supposed to give people energy, but you're doing it like this, like, yeah, you know, when you take this, it's going to really pump you up. And somebody's like, well, why don't you take it then? So there's that whole aspect of, even if you look at right now, the phenomena that really the world is also suffering from is some people can do this, and it doesn't have to be related to quote unquote spirituality and consciousness. Like, notice what we're dealing with here. Like, someone can bring out an extremely eccentric, off the walls, completely supercharged character, and then gravitate, and then have everything in the reality gravitating to them, but of course be leading it off the cliff like lemmings. So I constantly challenge myself, and I constantly challenge others to bring more of their presence here, bring out that enigmatic, dynamic character that is often shrouded in a realm of normality, and to start realizing that that is actually the key of compressing a lot of time. Like, I even demystified just recently how time was related to weight, and how we put more weight on ourselves based on when certain times are about to happen. Like, if we even bring this we bring sometimes anxiety upon ourselves when we know certain dates. Let's say we develop a prophecy that everything's going to end at a certain date. Let's say that we have even a bill that's due on a certain date. As that date gets closer, it actually increases the weight of what we feel. It actually causes us to generate some kind of fluid that gives us a feeling that that means more than other things. And if we just look really closely at what exactly is happening, we're seeing that, hey, those are the real mechanics to what creates weight, W-E-I-G-H-T, which also creates what makes weight, W-A-I-T. And then when you know how to demystify those two, now you've accomplished the theory of weightlessness. And now if you're weightlessness, this means instant manifestation. And it also means even the ability to not have the being held down. It even could lead to possibly the physical body flying. What I'm trying to explain to people more than anything is that there is simply no limitations at what can be accomplished here. It's about just knowing the formulas, the real formulas, the metaphysical formulas of how it's possible, and then loading that into your consciousness and not allowing what's witnessed in the double slot experiment, which is, if you believe that it's going to go in the left, then it's going to go left. If you believe it's going to go straight through, it's going to go straight through. If you believe it's going to go to the right, it's going to go to the right. So then if you have all these people around you that just believe it's not possible, what's going to happen in that field? And this is why when people get by themselves, which is generally accompanies any of these crazy awakenings, right? You generally then pissed everybody off, or you want to get away from all of them because they're all vampires, or whatever you go through at that point. You get into the space that's by yourself. And then this field is far more productive because there's no doubts in that field. And then this is, you know, how we look at things just on a different level to realize what's actually happening in our awareness.
Is there any technique that you recommend for people who want to call in more of their higher self, if you will, and to be, call in more of their soul power?
For sure. Get out of thought. Like, okay, so let me just demystify it once more, that the realm of thought is like entering into the mind, right? So the mind is a maze. So in this text, which is basically a reference to what goes on inside of the body, that people were confined to the mind to dig for gold. Okay, so that's the whole Sumerian story. And what's being presented is that basically that this mind, which is like a maze that we can dig deep into, that deep in our minds, we can bring out things that are gold, things that that the world's never seen before. See, like they say, there's nothing new under the sun. But like I said, we're literally time machines. So we bring in unique things into this space. And because this is a vessel that is nowhere near being filled, we bring our children, we bring our ideas, we bring all these things that the world has never seen before into this space. So we've bought our gold here. And generally, it takes us to dig into the depths of ourselves to reach it, whether it's a passion with another person, whether it's the struggle of building a company, et cetera, et cetera. So what happens is that now, when you enter this mind every day, it's just like that. It's like you're being conscribed to the minds. Now you must go down into this maze of darkness, et cetera. And this is how I find most people that deal with thought, because it's like an endless maze of more and more questions. And we just call that the quest. So then obviously somewhere in there's a minotaur, so as you're going down these corridors of the mind, right? So what happens is that there's a point where, and this is what I realized after like maybe 90 or almost 90 journeys on Diamond Tree, which is basically DMT, where I was just trying to defeat the monkey mind, defeat what happens when you get in these high vibration, this thing telling you're going to die. And oh my goodness, we've never been this high before. This is ridiculous. And what is that I see over there? Don't look, close your eyes. Oh, that's even worse. Open your eyes. And so it's like that whole, the monkey, I call it. I started after, 50 or 60. This is how long it takes for this thing to die sometimes. See, it's easier to do it in meditation because you haven't really added any like voltage to it. But when you take a bioethnogen, now, your chakras are on full spin. So we're going to see if that really worked out, what you needed to learn in meditation about quieting your mind. So that way you can tap into this infinite energy by getting rid of the whole division. But obviously that's easier said than done. So what happened was I actually got into a certain point of realizing that it was all going on when I kept engaging. Just like when you're like in a meditation, you think you see something, you're like, do you see that? And then the moment you snap out of that, you can't see it anymore. And that's just because you've engaged the R complex. This is what's actually happening. It's like a cog in the brain. And when you engage it, it actually moves backwards because it's connected with the primal side of self. That's why it's connected to the reptilian, the first strand of DNA. So when you engage that, it like turns the gear backwards, and that's not the direction you're looking at going. The frequency goes back down because it's more of a denser frequency, and now you're back to awareness again, but at least you landed. And that's where fear gets you, and language. So what I realized is that actually there was a whole nother level to where you could go even beyond by getting rid of the thoughts. Start realizing that it's much more easier to swim in deep water than it is in shallow. So there's nothing to be afraid of. If you trust yourself, you can actually let go. And then you get into this space to where, bam, you get into the all-knowing. Now, to try to explain the all-knowing is almost like an oxymoron. But what I'm working to tell people how to reach into this space is actually where the key to the perpetual energy inside of the body is. You literally feel the field of the body change into a different type of oscillation. I can't even say it's a direction. And this direction this field and how it changes, it taps the person into this more of this infinite stream of energy versus this confined kind of scarce energy. And, and that's the easiest way the easiest way that I can actually explain it. And so again, to answer the question, what is the most useful thing to do? Get out of thinking and get into knowing. And the easiest medication for that process and to get the deprogramming working properly is to get busy. Because what happens is that same thing, idle's mind is the devil's workshop, old statement, but it's actually really true. The more the mind has time to process, the more it's digging down the corridors to where it never found anything in the first place, and it's back going down those tunnels again. Get into the action by utilizing your hands hands, figuring out your uniqueness and discovering that. So basically being more active rather than going into the monkey mind and having those long stints of time where you're laying on the bed wondering if the world's going to be over, and this is,
right.
What I would think is the most useful thing now. And it's a process. It's almost even undistinguishable in the beginning, the difference between thinking versus knowing. And then also, I'm not saying that one is bad or good. Well, surely the all-knowing couldn't be a bad thing. But what I'm saying is that it starts to get you into the position of seeing yourself, going through all the judgments, burning up precious fuel, and then not getting to the conclusion of what you really want because you've eliminated yourself from it. So this is what I say is standing in the way of yourself. So you're encouraged to get out of the way of yourself, give the opportunity to fully observe the situation rather than judging it first so you can see the other side of it. Getting familiar with that space where it doesn't require you to always give input, like to judge what it is, but just to observe it, like I'm saying. And then you get into this free-flowing space, which is the zone. The reason why I can connect this like all the way around is because, see, every time, like imagine if I'm saying something and I keep having thoughts. So these thoughts are going to interrupt me. So if I'm thinking something, but I keep having different thoughts, they're going to interrupt me. So this is the same thing as like a wheel starts turning and then it's got to stop. Wheel starts turning, then it's got to stop. Our mind is filled with that kind of activity all day, where it starts thinking something, then it goes to another thought, then it goes to another thought. So it's never really getting anywhere or any completion. It's not turning a complete wheel. So what the all-knowing does is it gives the mind the ability to basically take a chill pill. So that way you can start building up more energy like a thermometer. So you're never going to know the benefits of this in the beginning without doing it first. And that's what the main thing to know is it's like you got to start doing it for at least a few days so you could start feeling the buildup of the energy. And then something weird happens. And this weirdness is that as the body begins to build energy, obviously, just like it's the chakra centers, the higher chakra centers start having the power to come online. And when the higher chakra centers start coming online, this increases the ability of perception and senses, like Superman. You increase the ability of hearing, sight, etc. And then what happens is that now you start to be able to witness how many things are really vying for your energy, especially now that you smell so good. Meaning that once you start building energy, you start to really, when you're conscious of this, see how things are attracted to that energy. You start, you're just standing in line somewhere and the girl or the guy in front of you seems like they're super attracted to what you're doing. People are more nicer to you. Somebody's trying to piss you off all the time and it's just abnormal, but you realize all of this is connected. Just like a dog has very strong senses, everyone else's energy centers are very strong to find things that have more energy and how they can get that energy. So now that you see this working, because now this is what's called the Therian, because your intelligence is so high, you've actually outsmarted a lot of the base life forms and the base forms of existence. So it's easy to see their play, which becomes more confirming to you that, now that I'm building my energy, it seems like everything wants it. And the more of it I have, the more perceptive I am. Like I'm catching the subtle stuff that I normally don't see. In conclusion, what I'm saying is I'm saying that this is how you get into yourself. And literally that term, they say, hey, man, you need to get like what I'm saying, get into yourself instead of other things. Because you're literally pulling your energy back into your body and realizing that, hey, you know what? I am really important here in this whole thing. I really do owe myself to figure this out. And this gives you so much more power and so much more ability to make things happen in your own life. And that, of course, puts you in position to actually make things happen in others.
Right.
So,
right. Yeah, that's such a fascinating and empowering concept to understand. Like, hold on, I can call more energy in for myself. I can call more of my higher self. I can call more, and you hear it all the time, or we've heard it anyway, when you hear about, enlightened masters or whatnot, they would just being in the room with them. I even had someone on who was talking about being in the presence of the Dalai Lama and feeling different, so there's more flowing through that being, right? And the great thing about that concept is, well, we all have the ability to tap in and to call in more energy. And of course, it makes us more attractive. It gives us more power to do the things we want to do, more, ability to understand, what needs to be done. It's just, it's such a wonderful concept to understand that you're self-sufficient and you're just scratching the surface of what you can call in.
Exactly. It's just reinforcing yourself. And in that, you can achieve an ultimate level of power. And this power is totally different than, like some kind of power hungry, whatever. This is needed. Like even now, it's like I've taken this out of the scope personally myself of explaining it as something that is like a philosophy. Like I have to put this stuff into action because I can actually power myself on negativity. And I'll explain that because somebody told me a long time ago, hey, son, if you can power yourself on negativity, then you'll be the most powerful person because there sure is a lot of it here.
That's interesting concept.
And I got to thinking about it. But I just started throwing that around in my brain, like, how would that really be possible? And I realized it's possible when certain things that appear to be negative happen and somehow this creates like a positive from you. So let's say, for instance, in my world, when they brought in the Donald Trump, that's when I knew I needed to become a sovereign. Like at that point, I just kind of shut down everything else and I said, you know what, I'm going to work on my sovereignty. So and so that's something that, let's say, negative that happens that promotes you to do something positive. And then likewise, anytime I see something crazy or quote unquote negative happen, I always say I have this ongoing joke with myself. I say, wait for it. Because there's always going to be this massive positivity that can be tapped into. And, and this happens, it's so, I always encourage people to be dynamic because even when it within whatever you're doing, like let's say, for instance, this Mayweather-McGregor fight, whatever, I did a video on that. I generally don't follow current affairs lately, especially because I've been so busy, but I've been realizing if you don't, you start becoming not relevant. And then you can really bend anything into these massive conversations. So look at it for what it really is. And so I did a video. And it's gotten, let's say, 40,000 views or something like that in one day versus, the other video, the key to the entire world, how to open up your own inner sanctuary and to explore the fullness of who you truly are. 3 views, 2 months. So it's like, okay, what's happening? What's happening here? So this is what ambassador training is also about, is someone finally having that sit down and talk with you that your father should have had and said, look, son, if it's only 5, 6 views, it to be something that you're doing. You can't really blame it on everyone else. And so I just, teach people to, take those opportunities, realize that you can guide that ship. I'm sure they're going to be back at it on Monday. They're cooking up one right now. Since that's over, Eclipse is over. What's next? Because it's all just media and energy. And I started seeing even deeper, and this is something I would love to present here because this was one of those revelations that are going to go by and no one's going to know what happened. But notice how when the eclipses go on, you have everyone looking at the sun. And this is something that can't really be stopped, right? So we already know that you can really gaze at the sun. They call that sun gazing and it's beneficial, right? But obviously there is so much fear of a large amount of people sun gazing at one time. Because I'm going to show you what that would actually cause. So, of course, they give everyone this glasses or whatever, but that doesn't shield out all of the power. But maybe it shields out maybe 60% of the balanced power. Because while they would call it a solar eclipse, there's still the moon rolling right in front of it, right? So at that point, and it's also a new moon, right? So it's a fat moon and then a sun, and then they're both together. Now in electronics, what we call that is power, real current, balanced, clean energy. So this means that this is probably the most useful brew is the sun and lunar and solar energy mixed in equal measure. Okay, because normally we're getting either one or another. So now that everyone in the realm was charged up because they've been looking at the sun, now they need to get the energy. And that's why I made the video Illuminati juicing. And I only call it Illuminati because everyone looks Illuminati again. Totally. But I call it juicing because now that everyone has been basically all these solar panels called human beings have charged themselves up. Now they need to get that energy. They need to juice that energy. And there's no better way to juice energy than evoking the same age-old fight between the black and the white to juice everyone else that's in the middle of the spectrum. I highlight that there's nobody that's really black because, there's an element called Vanta Black that shows you even the pictures of Vanta Black is like, damn, that's a whole nother level of black. And there's no one that's Snow White either running around here.
For
so
sure.
it's just all the misconceptions, but so we're looking at a gigantic mechanism is what I was revealing. I was talking about egregors and how energy can be concentrated and moved around within other thought forms and how people participate in this every day and they give up a portion of their energy. And then now, and this is what I was even saying in my ambassador class today, I was a constructive kind of mad. And when I get that kind of mad, that means I'm really going to hack into the system and do something massive for everyone because using a constructive way. But it's just the notion that 3 billion at least, because if they would give anyone 200 million or 100 million, whatever, they got to be making billions then. So you could just do a simple calculation about 3 billion. And we still have an issue with a deficit, some kids crying, mothers not getting, like, this is stupid. At this point, totally. It would make me insane to believe or to give myself any excuses about this system. But also, I would need to get ready to put myself in a position to move into action because I can do better than that. And this is where we are. Like, I feel like there's this other thing that plagues conscious people. And it's, even like making a video these days about something like Mayweather, it's like, I'm not stooping to that level, and that's sometimes where the mind goes with all of that, especially when you've got to a higher state. I don't put that into my system anymore. And it's like, I don't have to put anything into my system to express how I feel about it. I don't have to actually invest any of my energy into what mostly what goes on in the world because it doesn't take that much power when we're really talking about just voltage, energy, and frequencies to really manage a realm like what we're dealing in now. And this is also explains why we can run 5, 10 of these without even feeling any drain to the system, meaning that we got 5 or 6 realities running simultaneously right now and not having a problem managing those realities and keeping them separate from each other, et cetera. So this is what I was saying is like, that's why it's an adventure, because we gain a new way of looking at things. And it's more like it's just designed for how we see things now. And 2017, as I always say, something relevant. And then it opens up those keys for us in a way that we understand it to actually begin to let ourselves out of the prison. Stop playing the whole color game. And remember, color is contrast. So like, okay, I see this way because this is that way. Let that go and get busy. Start utilizing that creative mind and then just start chipping away at this. Like if you have something that you're ready to bring, this is the time to bring it. And what Unify is doing is it's just giving more resources to actually do that. That's all we're with right now. It's just giving people the ability to make their projections happen. Just like I said in the description, how do you manifest a massive projection? And then, of course, last but not least, there's 2 aspects of this. I call it the best of both worlds. See, obviously, a lot of people wanted to throw me on the cross when I start talking about, hey, maybe we need to fix the financial situation first before we start talking about the Arabot again. Shame on you, Sevan. There's nothing to do with the physicality, the mentality. You just get stoned in the streets when you start talking about, hey, maybe we need to get some stuff going on for ourselves. So what I've done is that I've created the best of both of those worlds. And so if anyone wants to get themselves together in relation to the spiritual knowledge, if some stuff flew over your head, you don't understand how it connects, we've dissected all this in things like celestial mechanics, explaining how you can look at the process of how you really got here on Earth to determine how you really got here into the galaxy, into this consciousness, etc. And so that way you see that, hey, this is not as mystical as you think. It's happening. And you just need to realize that there are stages to it. And you need to isolate those stages and see how those happen. So that's celestial mechanics. Then it goes all the way into every single thing that you can think of related to spiritual knowledge. And that's the Innerversity. And I know you're going to drop a link in the description, and anybody that wants to jump into the Innerversity.
Probably a good time to explain a little bit. Yeah, probably just a good time to explain a little bit of that. Basically, you've been gracious enough to offer Positive Head listeners a discount to if they want to sign up for any of this stuff, the Innerversity, where you obviously, as you guys can hear, Sevan's got a wealth of information to share, and we're trying to like cram it all into. It's why we did two podcasts back to back. Back and here you are again, and it's like it goes on. And I know there's hours and hours and hours of content and teaching and sort of very structured, dissemination of information through Innerversity. So maybe you can just give a little highlight into what that is and how people can find it, and if they want to take advantage of the discount that you're willing to offer, graciously offer as listeners, that now would probably be a good time.
Okay, for sure. Well, the basics are first and foremost, because we don't want anything interrupting a person from their expansion. 90% of our content is free. You can go and find it on YouTube. You can go to secretenergy.com. You can go to resistance2010.com. You can go to astroquest.com. Hey, pretty soon, any website you'll hit, you'll find us, literally, except when we get this whole thing working right with the pixels. But so just know that first and foremost. This is not a sales pitch. But what also happens is that we're documenting this in real time. So I kind of loathe going back to explaining things that I explained in the beginning, just because I always want to, because there's more to the knowledge. There's so much, right? And there's no limitation to it. So there's always something new coming across to actually enjoy. But many people that are jumping in at that point are like, okay, you completely missed me. I kind of feel what you're saying and I connect to it. I resonate. Like if I resonate with what you're saying, but I don't really understand what you're saying. And when people kept presenting that a few times, I started saying, well, yeah, and it's because, we have this certain way of how we deliver knowledge, and we need to now like just separate that into particular topics and then just exhaust those topics. So that's what the Innerversity is. The Innerversity is our attempt to separate information into these new type of topics and fields, so that way you can start to really take apart yourself and then put yourself back together. So if you want to join the Innerversity, we'll offer all Positive Head users 20% discount on the Innerversity, 20% discount on products like SheLegit. And then those links will actually be in the description, or during checkout at the secretenergy.com/store. You can actually use the coupon code Positive Head. And so there it is. So you'll have that. And then last but not least,
either the description of this podcast, you'll see a link there, or use the Positive Head code upon checkout. Is that correct?
Exactly. Well, they would need to use the Positive Head coupon code during checkout in order to get the discount, just so the system knows that it's actually checking in. But the links are in the description, or you could just go right to the site and use the coupon code.
Okay, got it.
The last thing is that the Innerversity is in semester 2. It's actually semester 3 coming up. But instead of going right into semester 3, I realized we need to demystify the whole money situation. We need to get people into the realm of power with themselves and on their way. And so we create ambassador training, which is really more dynamic. It doesn't just focus on the whole spiritual metaphysical side of things. It also addresses things going on in real life and how you can get yourself to another level. Also connecting you with tribe. And so we've just basically demystified it. And that's the whole open source wealth thing that I'm talking about. The second link will be about that if you want to check that out a little bit more. And again, I'm not going to drill into any of this right now because there's more than enough information on those pages to get familiar with what we're doing. But as I said, there's 2 aspects to this. There's our spiritual growth, which is always got to go on. And then there's what's going on in the matrix and the fake matrices, which we need to master in order to get the results that we're looking for as rapidly as possible, so we can move on to continuously expanding and get to the fun. So that way words like work no longer exist for us. It just becomes connection, resources, solutions, fun. And
opportunity.
Exactly.
Expansion opportunity. Beautiful, beautiful. Well, I really appreciate you doing that. I mean, that's a great discount, and I know you've worked really hard for many years to put all this content together. And with Innerversity, can you go back to, once someone signs up, they can go back to the first set of courses and kind of catch up if they want to?
For sure. With Innerversity, that's what you do is you actually purchase a semester. So you get, I believe it's 8 classes in a semester. Also, just so everyone knows, what we do is we build tons of value. Like I get people all the time say, hey man, you need to be charging a couple $1,000s for all this kind of stuff. And it's just like, what I stopped doing, especially with certain things, is giving them away for free, because then after a while, it's not perceived as having any value. And of course, a lot of time and a lot of attention goes into this. And this is what we all need to know, is that the time and the intention and the energy that we put into stuff, it's better if that's reciprocated. And then that allows us all to grow. So it's the same thing with this, is that we have a premium there, but, to make it clear with, our own consciousness and what we're really doing, we just keep trying to see, well, how much more can we pump into this? And so you get 8 courses. You also get connection with the group, which is basically infinite. And so this is something that once you sign into, you have friends for life, and you have something that you can keep accessing indefinitely. So it's just a way for us all to get to something. And last, also what I want to say is just remember that, man, I've covered 13,000 books. Like, I have no clue of where I'm even at. Like, I don't even need to read anymore. Every time I start looking at something, I'm like, I already know. I already read that. I know some people say, hey, did you see this? Yep, seen that. And so all that knowledge and information, I feel like, is the quickening, because instead of you having to necessarily go through a lot of that stuff, that some of the stuff is just a waste of time and garbage, we demystify it. We basically synthesize it. And then we put it on a platter, and we say, here's what was gleaned from that whole alien thing. Here's what we learned. And so every single mega field that could be like a lifetime of research, we simplify it as much as possible to allow the person to move on. And so what happens is that that's what creates this, what I would say is like the potency of the knowledge, where you can say something and it has 3 or 4 meanings to it, and it takes the person to sit back and decrypt it. So the Innerversity, and also remember the book, The Code to the Matrix, is on the internet, downloadable for free. Those kind of works, you could go back and read again and be like, dang, it's right there. Like, yeah, that's the same thing. So they have this, like watching a movie, that every time you watch it again, you're like, I didn't notice that last time, or that's what he meant, or I realized that. And I just feel like that's the most powerful and dynamic part of what we're doing is that every stage that you grow into, you see it different. It's almost like going back and reading a book at the awareness that you're at now, and then realizing that the book says something entirely different than what you thought it said when you read it before. Right. And so there's always that kind of depth to truth, because it does connect to our maturity. But we can't be afraid to enter the realm at times of the neophytes. Those are the people that are coming in right now. And as the word says, this is the new fight. So they love to duality and all of that. So if you moved on to the all-knowing and beyond, sometimes those kind of people, it's very difficult for them to go back into the whole neophyte scenario. Likewise, we have a lot of initiates. That makes up the biggest group in the conscious community. These are people who've already seen different spiritual systems, already been through different ones themselves, and they're still deciding. They're still kind of on the fence at what they believe, and they're formulating their own thing, which is great. But that makes up the bulk. And then you have this adepts, which are like, okay, son, you don't need to keep breaking it down for me. Just tell me, what do we do now? And then that's, of course, when we get right into the action and we say, well, definitely get with us right here, because we're developing stuff right now. We're already meeting next Sunday. We got chats going on all day, 24/7, and it's happening. So that's what it is. So just understand the difference between what I feel like is the difference between this and so many other things is that we make a conscious effort every single day to see progress and to also make sure that others are getting progress. So that's what's up. And we're doing that out of the love, the compassion, as we call it, the compass to Zion. That's like the real depths of the divine feminine, divine masculine, which is, I don't care what it looks like. I don't care what its story is. I'm going to assist it, and I'm going to nurture it to its complete self, its complete growth, its uniqueness. That's why when you got a sickness or disease, generally, if the mother is on balance, she's not going to reject you. She's even going to risk herself catching that disease just in order to get you well again. That's the compassion. And so we move with that compassion, and we move with that together, and we know we're powerful enough to handle anything. So I want to say thank you, of course.
Yeah, Sevan, as always, you are such a light, such a catalyst and energy for change and wealth of knowledge. I feel like we could probably go on and on and on, but hey, you know what? This allows us to have something to look forward to, because I have no doubt you will, if I'm lucky enough to get you to come back on the show, there's plenty more to talk about.
if it's just me and you, I'm on the line. So yeah, for sure. I mean, and thanks so much for Positive Ahead for also being that beacon. I mean, meeting Gabby and Umberto and so many different people that I've met, through Tim, and then him plugging me with you. And man, it's just been like a real connection with tribe and family. So that's why I say, I'm going to pour my all into it. I hope today, I was able to transcribe enough of the message and what's going on. I get super excited. And so in that, sometimes clarity is lost, but hopefully the intentions are felt of someone who is truly here to assist you on all levels, not being callous to one thing or another, but considering everything. And that's why I say, with all things considered, we're here doing our best for you, me, Brandon, everyone else that's involved in the whole conscious movement, which I believe includes all of us. And we're just coming into this stage of awareness of bringing this thing back online. So wholeness and balanced vibrations, check us out at the links in the description.
Absolutely. And the authenticity, excitement, and energy there's no way it cannot be felt. And I often say, even if there is things that maybe go over people's heads sometimes and things like that, it's like, it's so much how you're saying it and what they're feeling as you speak, even more so than what's being said. It's truly transference of energy, and you definitely are doing a lot of that. And I certainly applaud you and appreciate you, my friend, and look forward to next time.
Oh man, you too, brother. And I'll talk to you soon, and definitely wholeness to everyone. Let's do this.
Let's do it. Until next time, journey well, my friend. Well, everyone, that concludes this week's interview episode. If you have enjoyed this positive download from our hearts and minds to yours, please take a minute, give us a rating or review on iTunes, since iTunes is the holy grail of all things podcasting. Your good reviews help us to reach more listeners. Also, we would be extremely appreciative if you would tell your friends and family about the show. Our sincere intent with the Positive Head podcast is to spread positivity to the world because we're selfish, quite honestly. I say that jokingly, but really only halfway joking. I'm referring to the good kind of selfish based on the knowing that we all get what we give in this life, because when we give, we're actually always giving to extensions of self, since we're all really one in the same consciousness, just in different bodies. So if you want to be a good selfish along with us by helping to spread the positivity, by all means, please proceed to shout about the Positive Head podcast from your rooftop. Otherwise, as you continue on your fabulous journey in this 3D reality, be sure to remember this. As long as you ain't dead, you're already positive ahead. Journey well, everyone, and thank you for being.